I have a question. Is everyone redeemable? It's a question that I've asked myself a ton over the last few years, and I think I finally have an acceptable answer to it. Let's talk about it. Welcome, everyone, to Outsider Information. I'm your host, Brandon, and your strategic partner here with OIAS. As always, if anything resonates, like, subscribe, engage. Just because it is a slower week doesn't mean that things aren't still happening fast. Go through the archive, slow things down for yourself, have a good time. Drink of the episode, if you haven't realized by now, this is a tea propaganda page, and this is a cup of robust Earl Grey that is tea-licious. That's what you're here for, right? All right. So we talked about in the open about redeemability and what is irredeemable, what is redeemable. So I want to start with this. Historical dive into two very vibrant sports personalities. Charles Haley, who was an NFL player, San Francisco 49ers, Dallas Cowboys. Dennis Rodman, who is most notably a Chicago Bull, but was also with the Detroit Pistons as well. Why these two? Because they were both authentically themselves, and they were both incredibly smart. Those two things are why we are going to talk about redeemability versus irredeemability. So in Charles Haley's case, when he was traded from San Francisco to Dallas, there were some notable issues, right? Locker room things. Acted a little bit crazy at times. And when Jimmy Johnson made the trade for Charles Haley, he had one question. How smart is he? Off the charts, apparently. And the 49ers attested to that. And in Jimmy Johnson's mind, he thought that if he was smart, Charles Haley, then he could be reasoned with. And that is a brilliant way to look at people. I mean, it is when you treat somebody with intelligence, you are likely going to get an intelligent response. If you open the door for crazy, people are going to oftentimes act crazy, right? It's a runway to engage in their darkest impulses. Dennis Rodman was a different case. Dennis Rodman's personality fit in Detroit and in Chicago because there was a very firm structure around it. And when you've got structure around people who maybe need it, oftentimes they thrive because that is the thing that is holding them together. And when companies or people take risks on personalities due to talent or thinking that they can do something with it without the infrastructure, it very rarely works. And it doesn't work because you don't have the framework in place to hold the crazy back. Both of those individuals are fascinating case studies in how the environments around them can absolutely determine the outcome. And when we look at that, it brings me to what is now the most fascinating case study in politics, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, we're not going to talk policy, and I tend to avoid politics, but the reason why this is so fascinating is the sudden heel turn that exists and ultimately resulting in Marjorie Taylor Greene saying that they are going to retire in 2026. So I go back to that question. What makes somebody redeemable or irredeemable? Because right now, that is the question that so many people are asking with this person. Why? Why all of a sudden are they deciding to not change sides, but back off? I've got an article that is going to be out today. I'm recording this on a Monday in advance of this coming out on Tuesday that talks about the general tone around the holidays. The title of it, The Family You Knew Died Years Ago. The holidays are a complicated time for people because while many people evolve and grow, there's a lot of things back in your home that stay the same. And it creates that same dynamic of change, redeemability, irredeemability, trauma from the past. What allows you to grow and move forward? And when we look at a lot of this, there are some principles that are constants as we go through this journey. All right? And we are going to break down some of it and try to do as much as we can in the time that we have here. All right? The number one thing that we need to acknowledge that we all have is choice. And when we look at how people act and when people create really toxic dynamics and when they do terrible things, people are choosing to do all of those. That may hurt my argument, but I think it also helps it because when I have conversations with so many different people, from the people who are working on the floor to the person who's running a company, people with religious backgrounds, political ideologies, the one thing that I want to know is, do you really believe everything that it is you are saying in this moment? Or is it a grift? Or are you trying to get something else out of it? The answer is yes and no. People believe what they think they know. And in a lot of ways, them believing it allows them to feel safe. They have community. And in many ways, it's them not wanting to be wrong. But that goes back to what I was saying is it's all a choice. What you should be looking for when people do anything is how authentic the packaging is. No matter how deplorable the behavior is, you want to see if there's an inkling of authenticity in there, because that is ultimately how you are going to come to the conclusion of whether or not somebody can be redeemed or if they are irredeemable. That is the issue with mainstream politics on both sides. And it's honestly a general issue among people. People are not comfortable always being authentic. I've said plenty of times that there is freedom in authenticity. But to get to that point where you can feel free, you have to be ultimately comfortable with yourself. And there's a lot of comfort in conformity because it doesn't make waves, right? You're not bothering anybody by going along to getting along. Again, going back to the article that I put out today that you will likely read tomorrow, that is the big issue, right? We idolize the things that we know. And when we were growing up, we idolized our parents. They were there for our safety. They were the ones that provided for us, and it created an image of them that we held on to. But know this too, people are capable of changing when they want to, and to suggest otherwise really ignores human nature. Change and adaptation is a survival instinct, and people do it when they want to, and a lot of times they do it in very manipulative ways. So back to the original question. Is everyone redeemable? The answer is yes, but they are not redeemable to everyone. Enter Marjorie Taylor Greene. The heel turn isn't really all that stunning. And I get the skepticism, and we're not going to rattle off all the things that she has said that might have been offensive to some, but she had this thing going for her. She really believed the things that she believed. Now, relating that back to what I said about Haley and Rodman, reason is possible with people who are deeply committed to something that they believe, even if it's delayed because of that authenticity piece. Now, I get why that wouldn't be enough, because the heel turn seems like it only happened because Marjorie was being affected by something that she had inflicted on others. But we also have to give credit here because she did also back down when many others did not, right? Pair it with her being a woman, the dynamics can get very complicated, but her holding firm on what she was doing, I would say shows something that a lot of people haven't shown on that side of the aisle in quite some time. So is she redeemable? We'll have to see. But what she did was acknowledge the past. Not necessarily an apology, and that may be needed for some, but the road, the runway, it's there. And people can be redeemed by some if they allow them to be. That goes back to what I said earlier. It's a choice. Now, for those who have been impacted by somebody, it's a little bit harder, right? We can't just say that because somebody is choosing to apologize for something or to maybe give a mea culpa that their apology will be accepted. That's not how it works. And if you are the person who's apologizing, you have to acknowledge that as a possible reality in the journey that you might be on as you are making a change in your behavior. But again, as humans, we are capable of anything, and how it's received is up to the individual and their willingness to move with it. All right, so people are redeemable. They just might not be redeemable to everybody. And I would say that being irredeemable is more subjective than being redeemable. And while you may not want to give someone who is offended the runway to redeem themselves, someone else might. And if they do, they are not worse for doing so. Easy, right? Simple one on a Monday. I thought this would be an interesting one to go into. In 2026, there's going to be a lot more topics like this, hopefully with people who can expand a little bit more on the dynamics, who can explain some of this stuff further. But check the article that I've got out on family dynamics. I have wanted to put that one out for a while, and I felt like this week going into the holiday season was right to do so. So on that, like, subscribe, and engage. As always, we cannot save the world with anything that is discussed here, but if we make the world a little better, a little less worse, that means doing my part. Stay safe, stay sane, especially on this Thanksgiving week, and we will see you next time.